Right. Good evening everyone and welcome to the Planning and Highway Committee meeting today, the 7th of September. Just some housekeeping rules I've got to read out, so bear with us. Please be aware that the Council is video recording this meeting and this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I'd like to highlight some key points of the meeting format. Please can I ask everyone to have their phones turned off or set to silent. The fire exits are via the doors out of the chambers and down the external fire escape stairs or via the main entrance that you entered the building through. In the event of a fire, the lift should not be used. The assembly point is outside the Royal Mail Parcel Office on West Street. Please remain seated unless you are invited to speak or need to take a comfort break. The toilet facilities are out in the corridor you entered through. Members of the public are invited to participate in the meeting with the key points as follows. Public participation is limited to a maximum of 4 minutes per person and must be relating to an item of business on the agenda. As Chair, I will interject if needed to enforce this. For those looking to speak specifically about a planning or tree works application on the agenda, you will be invited to speak immediately before the committee considers that application. For those looking to speak on non-planning application business, you will be invited to speak during the public participation agenda item. Please raise your hand to show you wish to speak and I will invite you to speak. If you are comfortable standing, please do so to ensure you can be heard across the room. You do not need to state your name when you start speaking if you do not wish to, but we ask that you clearly state which agenda item you are speaking about. I would ask that the participants looking to leave the meeting wait until the end of an agenda item to limit distraction from other participants. Members of the public looking to leave the building will need to be escorted out by a council officer. If the meeting goes into confidential session, a short 2-minute break will be held to allow members of the public to leave. To all present, please remember to show respect to others in the meeting and avoid interrupting where possible to enable others to follow the meeting. If any councillor feels concerned about any aspect of the meeting or discussion, please clearly state point of order. I will then gesture for you to elaborate. If anyone present is felt to be behaving unacceptably, they can be ejected from the meeting by resolution. Thank you for listening. On behalf of the Council, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this Town Council meeting. Thank you. Right, so we start with agenda item 1, apologies for absence. And I've just got one apology from Councillor Olivia Honeyman.
Yeah, Councillor Olivia Honeyman has a mayoral engagement tonight. Otherwise, all the other members are attending.
Thank you. Item 2, disclosure of interest. To deal with any disclosure by members of any disclosure board pecuniary interests and interests other than pecuniary interests as defined under the Seaford Town Council Code of Conduct Localism Act 2011 in relation to matters on the agenda. I've just mentioned that I'm a member of the Seaford Bonfire Society on the road closure. Item 3, public participation. To deal with any questions or brief representations from members of the public in accordance with relevant legislation and Seaford Town Council policy. In accordance with Town Council policy, members of the public wishing to speak on individual planning applications may do so immediately before each planning application. Yes, Adam.
Good evening. On behalf of residents of Cratchell Close, we would just like to say a big thank you for the help and support we got in trying to have the McCarthy and Stone planning rejected at the Planning Inspectorate inquiry in July. We were unsuccessful, but we cannot fault the support we've had from Seaford Town Council, and we'd like to thank you for that. And we would definitely like to thank Jeff for the support he gave. We came to the flats with Christine Brett, who also has been an absolute gem. So thank you very much. We realise that up in the battle there's nothing really you can do. We just hope that everything that McCarthy and Stone is supposed to do it, and it's followed through by the District Council. But seriously, thank you very, very much for the help you've given. And we really appreciate it. And we wish you good luck with Florence House.
Can I say thank you for taking the time to come here and say those kind words, and especially to Jeff Appladimax.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. So, thank you. And I know you must have a hell of a job on your hands, but we do appreciate the support you've given us, so thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll leave you there. Thank you very much.
Now we're okay. Ready to go? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Letter. You got a letter to read? Oh,
What you do is appreciated, even though it doesn't really refer to it.
was that them?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got genders. Yeah.
It's easy to find that. It's off the top of my head, I can't.
Still on agenda item 3, I had an email from Councillor Brett, and that she wanted to say that she approves the recommendations of agenda item 7, Florence House.
Are we dealing with that now, Chair, as we've been talking about it or not?
Sorry?
Are we dealing with that now, or are we going to wait till we get to it?
No, we wait
Okay.
till we get to it, but I just thought I'd mention that in the public participation. Thank you. Agenda item 4, planning applications. Planning applications received week commencing the 7th of August. LW/23/0466 Dundragon, Bookmere Road, first floor, 2-storey side and rear extension, and 2 by rear dormers. Who would like to lead on this one? Okay, Councillor Markwell.
Well, just to say, I had a good look around the area. There are very large houses up in Brookmere Road. They're all slightly distinctive and different from each other, but many of them have quite large front pieces. My personal feeling was that this particular, they've got a sloping garage there at the moment, and they've removed that and put this in, and I kind of looked at the other houses that have all done that, or they've all done it in some way or other. So as long as this is quite a distinctive property, it's got a turret at the front of it. I guess as long as it's sympathetically undertaken, so that which other obviously additions to other properties in the road have been, then it doesn't differ from the size of properties in the road, and in fact it's probably one of the smaller ones, except it has the additional garage at the moment. So.
Yes, I think that bears you out because
yes,
see
you see the footprint of the other properties.
The plot sizes are the same through you.
Yeah, I think so.
The plot sizes are the same, but all the houses seem to take up most of the width of the plot.
Yes.
And this, in a way, puts that property in scale with the other properties because it uses the width of the plot as the others do as well. And there's, I think, 1.5 metre gap there, which is very similar to the boundary gaps of the other properties, Rosemary Cottage and Springfield Cottage either side. So obviously, as long as it's well designed, you know, it seems to fit in. And I just go back to the drawings are quite good and show that the extension is designed to blend in with the rest of the property rather than make a statement of its own. And so yes, it's substantial. It's a large extension to the footprint, but it seems to fit in.
Yes, it is because of the nature of the size of the building. At the moment, they've got a garage with a sloping garage roof, so it doesn't go quite up to the hills anyway. So it's taking up practically nearly the width, but not the height. So, but yes, certainly the majority of the properties always had done something with their garage space, in a similar vein, so it wasn't outside of that.
So are you proposing to support this?
So I would propose to support
Councillor Gorman?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will second that. They've made it subservient by setting it back slightly from the front of the building. The roof to the extension is slightly lower, so they have made it subservient, but it does blend in with the building, and they're keeping the lovely colours.
Councillor Hanneman.
No, thank you, Chair. I thought it needed renovating anyway, so they've gone to the next stage and done it more substantially. But I was happy with it. Even though it does look substantial with the balcony set up and everything, and with the window section, I would also support.
Any other comments? Right, so can I have show of hands of supporting this application?
That's unanimous support, thank you.
Planning applications received in the week commencing Monday the 14th of August. LW/23/0474, 14 Green Walk, erection of a detached double garage with first floor office and associated widening of the driveway. Who'd like to leave with this one? Councillor Hanneman, to speak you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm sure Councillor Mark will be doing something similar, but I like the way it is a separate design, and just because of the end of Green Wall, which is obviously the next road from where we've just been talking about. So again, another road with substantial properties in it. And this at the end of that particular drive has got, on the circular, there's space there for them to do this particular development with the double garage and the widening of the driveway. Originally I thought it was out of place, but it sort of supplements that particular site, so I'd support it.
Thank you. Any comments?
I think I'd agree. I mean, the widening of the drive is actually on the bend.
Yeah.
The place is a really quiet area, and there's certainly it's a large front garden anyway. In fact, the size of the gate at the moment isn't probably much less than it will be when it's being opened up a bit more for double garage. It's a little bit tatty and needs sorting out anyway, so it needs slightly wider.
Yeah.
But I didn't see that it's going to make that much difference. Yeah.
Councillor Dorman?
I think it's very large, it's very tall, it sits right towards the front of their garden. And I know we've had outbuildings, which are, okay, this is a garage with building, like office spaces on top, but we've had this office spaces go through, be rejected by Lewis because our neighbourhood plan says no outbuildings and things in the front garden, and this will be their front garden, so I'm actually not keen on it, and I would probably object to it.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I've got the site is here, so that outbuilding there, the roof is obviously on the boundary, so it's next door's property. That's number 12. This is number 14. Here's the access from Green Walk there. So it will go there. We can't see the height of that building.
It's in the...
Yeah, it looks to be. So, yes, it is quite an attractive design, but it is 2 stories. It is 6 metres high, I think.
6.18.
And so it would come well above the line of that building there. Although there's no representation from the neighbour. But so that's one thing to take into account. But yes, it's an attractive design. It's one which is quite common now, the use of the timber and the hip gables. But it is 2 stories. Often they're just the 1 story and but as I say, 6 metres. The neighbour might be quite happy with it. We don't know. But just looking at it.
Councillor Huntman, do you want to come
Yeah,
back?
if I can come back, yes. I mean, if that was the main house right next to it, then I would say it wouldn't be suitable having the double, having the high office. But as I say, we don't quite know what that long building is used for, and it's away from the neighbour's house. I mean, I have a preference. I'd prefer, if they were going to do an office, to put one of the office next to one of the garages, next one either side, and do the whole lot on one level. But this is what they've obviously come up with. So I think I'd still support it, how it is mainly.
Any other comments? No? Right, so we have a proposal on the table, proposed by Councillor Huntman and seconded by Councillor Markwell. Does that still stand?
Yeah, it does actually.
Yeah. Okay, so can I have a show of hands in supporting this application?
1, 2, 3.
Those against?
1, 2. So it's supported.
Abstain.
3, 2. 1 abstention. Supported.
Sometimes they've rejected afterwards when it's closer to the end date, but they've got or it may not have even been added yet.
Alright,
Just because there's a delay in adding objections.
moving on, LW/23/0457, 4 Cricket Field Road. Single storey side extension with associated landscaping works. I'd like to leave on this one. Councillor Honeyman?
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, as you know, we're now back to what we call normal housing in quotes. Yes, I mean the whole road is a mix of different sorts of properties from different areas. I mean, and this is a little bit like an infill, isn't it? Really, but that's what the developers that's what they've sort of identified. I'm not sure it's good or bad actually. I'll see what the other people think about it. But I was quite happy on what I was looking at. But it's infill effectively, and you're using up the appropriate space where you can. So.
Councillor Buchanan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The extension bit actually does seem to sit a little bit lower than the original accommodation. In terms of the subservience issue, it's certainly not overall. It's quite a clever arrangement.
Councillor Coleman?
I think it's very subtle really. They've got a little sort of smaller walkway joining the extension and the main property, and I think it looks quite nice, so I'm quite happy to support it.
Yeah. I think it's quite nice that we're using timber shingles, you know, so to give it some character. Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Buchanan proposed to support this application, seconded by Councillor Borman. And can I have a show of hands, please?
That's supported unanimously, thank you.
LW show 23/0478, 65 Upper Belgrade Road. Erection of a dormer to the rear elevation with 2 Juliet balconies. Resubmission of LW show 23/0238. So if we can.
Just for there's a subtle difference between the plans that were rejected before and the current plans, and so I want to display the old plan and the revised plan because that will show exactly what the application is getting at. And so it means I have to go back to the old application. So it takes a little bit more time because I can't flag up the old application from the agenda. But it'll be worth the wait. Right.
That's what I did first. I was put up the old one and then looked at the new one.
You can't deal with it unless you've got both plans in front of you.
The original that you're looking for is revision B.
Really?
I understand.
Well,
The new
it'll
one
come
is
up
revision
and
C.
the first one must have been terrible. We objected before and it was refused. So that was refused under stroke 0238 a few months ago.
Yep.
And
So is that revision B?
well,
That's the one that was rejected.
this is the new one.
That's the new one.
This is revision C. So A is completely out the window, must have been rejected before the old application was refused. This is roughly the same height, but has been drawn in at the sides in response to the objections based on the design guidelines in our neighbourhood plan, which say that that rear dormers like this should not extend to the whole width of the roof because it makes it far too boxy, and ideally should be lower than the ridge line of the roof. This one, as I said, was rejected. It's the entire length. The question is really, has the proposed dormer been drawn in sufficiently to sort of get rid of that boxy effect and make it sort of sufficiently acceptable under the design guidelines? And it's a question, it's a difficult question really, because they've done what they were asked for. Have they done enough really? It's a question of opinion. You know, it would differ, but so that's what you really have to deal with. That's the only question here, because everything else is the same, and this was the only sticking point in the first application. So as I say, it's that one is the new application. This one's the old application.
Councillor Cannon, did you want to come back on this?
Sorry, that's the old application.
No, this is the new one.
New one.
Do you have,
Because it's been drawn in here and there, as opposed to virtually filling the whole width. It's been taken in.
do you have the original?
Yeah, oh yeah, I guess. That's the original.
So what division mark is that drawing?
It's revision B
Okay, I must confess,
from last September, that is.
I looked at that and I looked at the new one and I didn't see the difference.
It's a bit like spot the difference in the old newspaper puzzles.
There's a very slight reduction in that.
It's 100.
Yeah, I said it's a minimal reduction.
Minimal reduction on the height,
Yeah.
but it is well, it's not substantial on the sides, but it is compared to what it was.
So it's
So you still can see it above the ridge line?
Yeah.
So that's the old
No, that's the old one.
That's
Yeah,
the old
no,
one.
but you
And
so
then
I won't
again.
confuse things. That's the new
That's
one.
the new
Yeah,
one.
so
That's
it's
what we
still
got.
slightly
Still
narrower.
see it.
It's still quite overwhelming, isn't it?
Bit busy, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's still the objection from the person at the rear, in Homefield Road.
Councillor Borman.
When I looked at it, obviously you can see that they've brought it in at the sides, and I thought, but it's quite a substantial width to that property. But then when you do look at the height, you can still see it. If you look at the front north elevation, you can see that additional there along there, which means it is still above the ridge height. So, and that is the main objection, so it has to be below the ridge height. So our objections, although we can see that they've made an effort to bring it inwards, which I would, if they brought it below the ridge height, I would not be able to find any objections, because it is still above that ridge height, our objections still stand. So that's what I would propose.
So are you proposing to object to?
On the same grounds.
So when you look on,
Councillor Cummings?
sorry, thank you, Sharon. Yeah, when you look on the side west and side east, you're trying to see it from the other direction. Yeah, it is above. It's above it, isn't it? Definitely. And that was our main thing. That was our main objection last time. Not so much. We don't mind the principle of having the dormer, but it's the height of it. So if it was a slightly one, which wasn't as substantial, then we'd probably be happy to support, wouldn't we? Is that how I'm thinking? Is that
Well, if you think
that's how you get
if
there?
you think about rear dormers, how they should not be overwhelming width-wise, but also height-wise, because the best dormers show some roof above. I mean, obviously it's unfortunate for some people, because some houses it's only worth having a dormer if you can cover the whole roof because of the size of the house and the nature of the house. And this is probably a house in question, but where a dormer fits quite comfortably, you've got a section of the roof above the dormer and a section of the roof either side, so it doesn't overwhelm the whole roof, because roofs give character to properties, just like elevations and frontage and windows. And this is sort of obliterating the whole rear block of the roof, which is why the design guidelines are drafted as they are. There's some properties just can't take a dormer of this size, and it's unfortunate. But that's what my view will do. But I'm not voting, obviously.
Councillor Canning,
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a thought. The reason the height of the dormer is what it is because it gives a bare minimum 2 metre clearance into space. And I think 2 metres is the bare minimum
It is, yeah.
for living space. I think that's right.
Yeah.
So that's the reason, presumably, it's set as it is.
Just because there's a bare minimum height doesn't necessarily mean you can put a dormer
No,
on
I'm
your
not
house.
saying, I'm saying that's why this revision C is what it is. Yeah.
Any other comments?
I don't
Councillor Clay.
think this design works at all. It's trying to put too much into something too small. The architect is trying to be a bit greedy. It just doesn't work.
Okay. So you've got second Councillor Gorman's
Objection.
objection.
Yeah, I would object.
And would you like to object on more or less the same grounds?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
the same grounds as before.
I'll say, yeah, reduction in width is not sufficient to fit in with the advice in the design guidelines, and the difference in the ridge height is minimal. So I think the same objections apply as last time. I set them out in the agenda, so yeah, I've got that.
Okay, thank you. Right, so can I have a show of hands of objecting to this application, please?
That's unanimous objection. On the, I say roughly the same grounds as before.
Planning applications received Monday, the 21st of August. LW show 23 show 0421, 3 Catherine Lyle. Prior notification under the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order 2015 as amended, Schedule 2, Part 1. Class AA for enlargement of dwelling house by construction of additional stories to increase the total height from 4.2 metres to 5.6 metres. Bearing in mind this is a garage. It's
Yes.
sort of confused.
Yeah, it's just I better briefly explain what a prior notification application is. When the government recently, well, over the last few years, has moved to relax permitted development rights, to allow more houses to be extended with larger extensions without the need for planning consent. One of the relaxations was being able to add a story to either to any part of the existing house. In this case, it's the garage, which is obviously part of the house, although it's detached. But as a safeguard, the government required anybody trying to use these permitted development rights to put in a sort of a less formal application than a full planning application, just to see whether there were any objections. And if there weren't any objections, then no further application would be needed. And if the local authority thought that it was unacceptable, then they would require an application for planning permission. So it's like a halfway house to test the water. If it's okay, they can go ahead. If it's not, they have to go through the usual process of putting in a full planning application. To be fair, the plans in this case are the plans that would normally be submitted in a full application anyway. But you can consider the application in exactly the same way as to what impact it has on the house itself, on the character of the street, and on the neighbour, which are the main issues in the case. So,
Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, sorry, just a clarification, I think the fan was in my ear. This is the general permitted development application, is that what you said? That was the term you used.
it's classed as permitted development if there are no objections to these plans. It's like a halfway house, halfway between not having to put in an application at all, having a small extension which is permitted development, and between that and a full application for an extension, which needs full planning permission. It's a bit complicated, and but it's meant to be a safeguard so that this new right to add a story to a dwelling is exercised in a way that sort of protects neighbours and protects the appearance of the house. But it was originally intended that anyone could add a story to their house without need for permission. I think this was put on, as I say, as a late safeguard to stop any monstrosities being built.
Councillor Longman.
Well, thank you. I mean, this argument was similar to the one we had over at Bishop's Way, wasn't it? So when they're extending out a little bit, and if there was no objections, then we'd go ahead. I think there was a couple, so it would have gone to full planning, wouldn't it? I mean, my only issue with that is not so much the actual design of it, but obviously it's a top of Catherine Way, so you'll notice it from quite a long way. It's imposing in that context. But the actual design is absolutely fine, but I suppose the location we're thinking of now, as opposed to the actual.
I'll show you the location plan because it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's.
We're looking at this. Looking at this garage looks as though it belongs to number one.
Well, that's the garage.
That's the colour, yeah.
And that's number 3.
And when you view it from the front, that garage looks as though it should belong to number 1.
Okay.
Because of the angle number 3 is at.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Which.
And there's been no objection from the neighbours and
neighbours.
It's only usually the 2 neighbours either side that are.
Councillor Martin.
Yeah, just having a look round up there, no one else has done this in quite such the same way. Now this is an anomaly in the street because it's got this wider boundary area and the detachment of the garage from the house. But on both sides of the street, going down Catherine's Way, they are fairly similar. No one's actually done anything different with their additional garages, and it's quite, it's kind of red brick with some terracotta, kind of designs along the street. So it's not a street where people have done lots of different things. This is quite definitely a clear design factor within
All
that
the
area.
garages have all got apex roofs.
And they've all got apex roofs, and so this is a great anomaly to that, which I'm personally feel very comfortable about. And also it's very higher than the other garages are lower than the roof line, not the apex, but the line, not above it. So I think it would be quite an odd. Whether that's enough I don't know, but our specialist over here.
I struggle with general permitted development sometimes because it is really hard to know. But my concern with this, we're putting an additional floor in, is that they'll then remove the garage door and put a door and a window in, and suddenly it will become maybe a 1-bedroom flat or a studio flat, and then it's going to be 3A. That's my concern on this one actually, is that it's actually going to become another dwelling. Because why would you put a second floor on a garage with the windows?
Yeah, and it's the windows as well, which is quite interesting and would overlook the other side of the roads. So it's
So I'm not sure whether it's about going to
Yeah.
full, well, we can get it to go to a full planning application because you're looking at what's there now,
Yeah.
but the concerns that it could go, that actually maybe is there something we can do?
Yes, but if there was
It's
a
going
separate,
to be that high.
Can we
Yeah.
just have one meeting, please?
if it were allowed through as it is, and it was found it was being used as a separate unit of accommodation, it could be actionable and enforced against anyway, because, you know, it's being passed off as permitted development, being passed off as an extension of the dwelling house, and that would, so it wouldn't need a condition attached to it. If it were being found to be used separately, it would be a material change of use of, you know, the garage and extension to a separate dwelling house and could be action. But there's no harm in voicing a concern that, you know, it could be easily converted, because it's sort of saying, you know, prevention is better than cure. Really.
Okay. Right, so Councillor Buchanan.
Sorry, through Chair. I haven't walked down that road. I did a Google map thing and I tried to imagine this extension and how it looked. Maybe it's just me, but I thought it kind of worked.
It will be quite prominent in that road. I know the road quite well.
I have to bow to that view because I didn't walk it.
To me, it feels top heavy anyway, but there is, the way it's angled, I mean, you have got quite a bit of room either side, and that sort of, you know, is where Councillor Borman's coming, it could be an individual dwelling.
I think, sorry,
Councillor Hunter.
are we allowed to put a clause in to say that it can't be like we had before,
Yeah.
which we would do it?
It's to be an annex to the main dwelling.
I mean, is there any more detail about this? I mean, they could use it for an office, couldn't they? I mean, that's what
I
probably.
think that's what
That's what the intention.
Yeah, I'm going to say, but yeah, which is fine. I can see where they're coming from. I mean,
Yeah.
it's modern office. It looks a bit like a modern office if it goes ahead, doesn't it? I mean,
I just feel it's out of keeping with the street.
It's bordered, that's the thing, it's a different,
Yeah.
as Councillor Markwell says, it's a different design, different use of material.
Yeah.
so are we allowed to do another clause, Chair? Similar materials.
Well, we
That's what I
could,
mean.
we could object on the basis that the material, you know, it's not,
Yeah.
if you want to, it's not a sort of, not a design in keeping with the rest of the street, and the use of materials is not in keeping with the rest of the street, so it's out of character.
I see where they
It's
come
out
back
of
on,
character
yeah.
with its own property in a way, because and the other. So that could be part of, if you wanted to object, that could be part of the objection. I'm concerned that it's going to be used as a separate unit, that it's top heavy and angled, it's angled away from the property in any case, in line with number 1, rather than the host property number 3. So, yeah, there's plenty of, if you wanted to object to it, there's plenty of material there to base an objection on.
Right. Can I have a proposal? Councillor Hunter.
Yeah, I can propose to the objection, and then I mean it does give them scope to come back on things anyway, doesn't it? So that's what we're doing. So because I don't think we're not against the principle of doing nothing to it. It's just what's there at the moment, isn't it? And that's what there is scope there because of where it is. There isn't the space in there, so they can do something. Thank you. But I'm happy to support the objection.
So just to be clear, sorry, the wording that you would use in the notes is that, as you mentioned there, Councillor Hogan, is in principle the idea of extending upwards isn't being objected to. It's a bit how it looks in terms of materials.
Yep.
And there's a future concern which has ways around in law anyway of it maybe being used for accommodation. Is that how, that's the wording?
Well, they can convert the garage anytime. It's just the question of adding a story to it. Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to convert the garage as it stands to accommodation, they could do it. It's just the extent of it and the height of it and the design of it. But yes, I mean, yes, you could say that you have no objection to the principle of the garage being extended, but I think really you've just got to deal with what's in front of you and just leave it at that. And if they're unsuccessful in the outcome, then they can look again as to what might be acceptable, an acceptable way of extending it.
Okay. Right. So we have got a proposal rejecting this application. Seconded. And can I have a show of hands, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in objection.
An abstain.
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 Thank you.
1 abstention. Thank you.
Right. LW stroke 23 stroke 05004, 61 North Way, direction of single story rear side extension connecting to existing external garage. We'd like to leave on to Councillor Marco.
Yes, I've had a look around there. There's quite a lot of room at the back of the garage. You can see where it's going to be. Doesn't seem to be particularly.
That's, sorry Joshua, that's the proposed and that's the existing.
Around, yeah.
You see it's just the link between the garage and the
house.
and the main development at the back.
Yeah. It's quite a lot. That's side garden. It doesn't feel from the front at all intrusive.
No, exactly. The front elevation is probably maybe you say improved a bit because it's more
Yeah, it's tidier.
yeah
Yeah.
integrated sort of.
Are you proposing, Councillor?
Well, yes, I'll propose to accept that.
Any Councillor Farmer?
I'll second that and have no further comment.
Any other comments, Councillor Honeyman?
Yeah, in one level, Chair, I'm surprised they're doing it how they're doing it, but that's not, it's a personal choice, isn't it, how they left half the garage and all the rest of it, why they're not. But then I suppose you could argue that the garage while they're leaving is probably more like a shed anyway, so it hasn't been used for quite a long time as they comment, isn't it? So, but that's up to them, isn't it? You could argue they could, if you join the whole lot one into one, which you could do, of course, they could have done that, leaving the gap. But then you've got another issue, haven't you? So, because it is quite narrow plot, so I can see why they've done what they've done. But I'd support it anyway.
Thank you. So can we have a show of hands to supporting this application?
That's supported unanimously. Thank you.
LW stroke 23 stroke 0517 9 Milldown Road. Replacement single story rear flat roof extension with a lantern skylight and alterations to the rear fenestration. Let's lead on this one. Councillor Hammond?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's really effectively mended the flat roof, which has probably had its life, and it's quite a nice sort of small. They're all quite small properties around now on that particular infill, so I'm quite happy to support it. I'm not sure if I like the dome with the little skylight myself, but that's it's fine.
Is that kind of seconder? Thank you, Councillor Borman. Any comments? Any other comments? So can I have a show of hands for supporting this application?
It's supported unanimously. Thank you.
We'll move on to tree applications. TW stroke 23 stroke 0071 stroke TPO 9 Harrison Road.
Unfortunately, no plans to show you here. All the information on the application is in the description of the works, but they seem to be relatively straightforward and to sycamores as well.
comments? So can I have a proposer and seconder to support this application? Thank you, Councillor Gray, and seconded by Councillor Borman. And a show of hands, please.
That's supported. Thank you. Unanimous.
Agenda item 5, planning applications to be noted, and this is another tree which is one of our own, TW/23/0075 TPO. I did look at this one, and it really was good reading. I think this is how the tree application should be.
It's just, this is really just to illustrate that how we look after our own trees. You know, because it was mentioned briefly in the debate on the trees at the Crouch. You know, that we do maintain our own trees. So I thought I'd just put this on the agenda for your information to show what we do through our safety officer, mainly Bob Offord, to look after our own trees. And thankfully, he put more detail on there than most other applicants. So I'll feed that back to him.
Very good.
But it's straightforward maintenance in this case of the land that next to him. So that would be just noted.
Unless there's any questions, everybody note this
Can
agenda.
we feed that back to LDC as well, that this is actually what we're looking for on all our tree applications?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because sometimes, well, as the one before it said, there is nothing bold,
Yeah,
the title.
I can point that out to the three officers. Yeah. No harm in being a bit cheeky.
I think this is about, I don't know if anybody else has looked at it, it's about 4 or 5 pages of the report. And it tells you the exact reason why
It's
it
the reasons of
Yeah.
it, isn't it?
Yeah, and if it's needs to be done ASAP or it can, you know, but no, I thought it was a good report. Councillor Honeyman.
If I don't know if this is the right appropriate place, but if Bob's an expert at picking trees anyway, can he do a training session on it if he's able to?
No,
He's not able to.
he's very good, but he's not a tree expert. He gets in advice from contacts.
I see, right.
I mean, I think, you know, he knows more about trees than a lot of people. He was the one who gave me the checklist that they use for inspecting, that he uses for inspecting trees at the Crouch, you know. And he's just a very diligent safety officer. I mean, he spends a lot of time on issues like oak steps, checking play park equipment, stuff, things like that, and trees that come under his sort of general umbrella. He's very diligent, but he's not a tree expert, I'm afraid. He'd be very worried if we asked him to do a talk on trees.
Well, he's putting in pictures.
He probably uses the observer's book of trees mainly, like a lot of but no, he is very good.
Okay, right. Moving on to agenda item 6 on page 7. And to notify the committee of the replacement of FC Bridge.
It's just mainly for noting because we're not being asked to make any comments. Come to the end of the main path to now consent has been granted following the decision of the committee at South Downs National Park Authority in December. It was subject to a section 106 agreement which has now been completed. So consent's been issued. And really the purpose of the report is to let members know what's happened and what is of relevance to our concerns in the Section 106 agreement. You know, our main concerns, which we've expressed in the past, in past years before the new members came onto the committee, mainly concerned with keeping cyclists and pedestrians safe, sort of separate passage through and separate from vehicles, and knowing that the new bridge would speed up traffic and that there being two potentially dangerous stretches of road either side, straight road. I mean, the traffic does slow at the moment before it gets onto that straight road. This will inevitably speed up traffic. It's been acknowledged by highways that it will. but they're sort of hedging their bets, if you like, on what traffic calming or traffic safety measures might be required, and just saying that if we go into the meat of the obligations, it's they're going to wait and see what happens once the new bridge is open, monitor it very closely, and then take any measures which are deemed appropriate, speed limits, etc. And as it says it here, paragraph 3.6, they will be required to carry out a detailed post-implementation traffic management strategy to address how monitoring will take place in order to determine future traffic management measures required in the event that speed limits are not self-enforcing, and the period of time required for monitoring and how the results will be reported to the authority. So they're acknowledging that there will be a problem, but they're not saying how they're going to deal with it. They're just going to say we'll monitor it closely and decide what measures may be appropriate later, whether it's rumble strips or road humps or a 20-mile-an-hour limit or something like that. It could be anything, but at least it's part of the agreement and will have to be looked at. And the other interesting part is how they're going to achieve this requirement of biodiversity net gain. They're going to require a farmer at Littleton, or a farmer has sort of become part of the agreement because he's agreed to, I suppose you call it rewild, or put by a piece of land on his farm at Littleton to provide biodiversity gain by planting native species, rewilding. I mean, I don't know the details, it doesn't give them, but that's what you assume will happen to balance out the effect on the immediate area of the bridge that the new bridge will introduce. So it's rather unusual to have that requirement on a piece of land a couple of miles away, but the National Parks Authority has accepted it as an appropriate gain to offset the damage that the bridge will do. So I don't know if there's any comments, but as I say, we're not being asked for anything, this is just for information.
Councillor Cameron.
Yeah, thank you. Is there a drawing that shows how the road's going to be aligned?
Yeah, I should have. I can show you one quite quickly, because I know the reference at the South Downs. It sort of cuts off the triangle.
Yeah.
Take a few clicks, but I'll get there.
And the buses slow down the traffic anyway.
Yes, so not making an indentation so the bus pulls in. When the bus stops, the traffic stops, which is good.
21, I think it was. I think that's the one.
Nice work.
Yeah. 260 documents.
Yes.
Postal objections.
At the beginning
We've got
of
to start, isn't it?
these are all the objections.
Site confound layout.
That's at the top. Right, well, the proposed new bridge is there. The old bridge is, you follow the arrow.
Yeah.
The old bridge is there. The new bridge is there. It's not as clear as it could be. But yeah, there's existing bridge to be demolished. So it cuts off the triangle. It starts around about the entrance to that little, what used to be a summer house, which has been turned into a little dwelling. As you come down the hill, just on the left, there's a little chalet. It's like, let's say, like a converted summer house. The line of the bridge starts around about the entrance to that, I think quite near the bus stop, and cuts across. There's the old bridge is there. Is that clear enough?
I've got a feel for the arrow.
And it's quite steep as you come over and then go up the hill, so the hill slows it up a bit.
Yeah. It's the straight bit here that is a bit of a concern. Because obviously now, with the traffic lights, it's not very fast. But if there's an easier route across, it will speed up traffic down in both sections. But I suppose.
I mean, why they're going forward with the new bridges, because the existing bridges are not in very good repair. And we'd need an awful lot of money spending on it to make it, for future years. So, thanks.
It's
gone out. We're going for the new bridge.
Another way to say it's not dangerous, but it's not repairable.
No, we did have photographs of it.
Well, just to follow up here, so turning into the pub there.
Pub's there, yeah. Where's the pub?
The other side of the
Presumably that's no worse or better than it is at the moment, in terms of how long we might have to wait. Other than there are traffic lights at the moment.
It's only right coming out of the pub after hard work.
Yeah, they'll have to make sure that there's safe access for the pub, obviously.
Well, that was always the Sussex County Council argument of not putting traffic lights.
And the other problem is coming down quite rapidly, but then stopping because you're turning right into the pub. It's going to slow the traffic. It's not a natural turn there. It's a right-hand turn, and those are problematic, aren't they, for road traffic accidents? Right-hand turns.
Yeah, it's a large pub, but I don't think there's sort of enough movements in and out of the pub to make it too much of a concern. I don't know. I haven't seen any concerns. It's quite a long history. It's been to us a couple of times, and there's never been any concern about the pub. But yes, it's always been difficult getting in and out there.
Sorry, Councillor Hunter.
So don't worry, we're not making any decisions tonight, it's just a bit of a chat show.
It is, yeah. It's just
But it's interesting at the moment, obviously there is traffic lights, we're coming out the pub now, isn't there? Or do they just have to find their way with
They just use the gap between.
They just use the gap, they just have to predict, that's what happens there.
And they see the stopping, then they.
I mean, they've got obviously, it's not normally used as a general car park now, is it? They've got restricted stuff, so if you use the pub, you can give your registration number into the pub and it does it, it gets excluded you for parking charges.
It used to be used by early morning walkers and everything, but they've stopped that.
So that's all changed, that's interesting. But it's interesting they say the lack of cyclists and walking data. I mean maybe they're gathering that as we speak, I don't know, but I mean, as you know, it's not an official path goes up on the main road anyway, even now, even though occasionally you see people there, but I think people have got wind, it's quite dangerous actually using it. So
they're supposed to be marking a alternative route from the top of that hill, like Chington Lane north, around to the bridge, because it is dangerous. And what it doesn't exist in some parts.
I know, if you're unlucky and if you didn't know, you just fall into the road.
Exactly. But it should, yeah, it needs better signing, but there is a,
Certainly does,
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
That's just my
especially
comment.
if the speed of the traffic's going to be faster.
And,
And you know, this time of year, in the summer months, you see tourists actually walking up the hill towards Seaford.
but can I come back quickly? There's no, obviously Jeff's read the whole report, probably thousands of words in it, but there's no talk about speed restrictions on between at any stage?
No, they're just saving it until they can monitor it once it's in place. But they have an obligation to monitor it and to consider what safety measures might be required.
So that could be an option at one stage.
It's very wishy-washy, I suppose, but it is because they didn't want to commit themselves to anything, and it's just an intention to do something, you know, and it is in the Section 106 agreement, an agreement to agree something, which is not, you know, it's not always worth much, but in this case, there's enough interested parties to make them consider it at the appropriate time, because a lot of objections are based on that.
Okay. So, everybody is happy? Can have a show of hands of noting this report?
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got two agenda items, 6s.
Yes.
Agenda item 7.
To inserted.
Page 12. To update the committee members on the appeal just received against the refusal, planning consent of development at Florence House.
Again, we're not required to do anything other than to object to the appeal, which is something we would have done anyway. We were anticipating the appeal. When we objected last year, it was refused. It was refused really on the basis of a very strong and very critical appraisal of the impact of it on the national park from the officer of the National Park Authority. So, and that was, as I said, a very strong response to consultation, and it's what Lewis PC based the refusal on. The second ground of refusal was the lack of any drainage arrangements sufficient to serve the property. Because of where it is, there is already a lot of drainage on quite a steep hill. There's already drainage problems, and they hadn't addressed that in the application. We, in our objection, covered quite a few additional grounds. Our main objection was impact on the national park, but I go through them in the report. There was impact on South Down Road, health infrastructure, pressures, need for the development, traffic generation, housing needs. Our objections to both the Churchill development in Sutton Road and the constitutional development in Crouch Lane, we obviously included the pressure on health infrastructure, on the current GP surgeries in the town. You know, bringing more people in would impact on services, and also the question of the need for this type of housing in Seaford. But in both occasions, when the other two matters had gone to appeal, the inspector rejected them out of hand without really putting too much weight on it, because the planning system just doesn't really acknowledge that you can refuse a permission for development on the basis of lack of health infrastructure. It's just not considered to be a planning consideration. Nevertheless, I still think we need to express our concerns about it. It's just that in this case, I know that the national park impact ground will carry the greatest weight. So what I propose to do in the statement I've got to supply, the statement of case objecting to it, is to place maximum weight, if you like, on the national park issue and the drainage issue, because those are the two issues that are the subject of the grounds of refusal from Lewis, but also add our concerns about the need for this accommodation, about being overwhelmed with elderly people from outside the town, putting pressure on health infrastructure, etc., while inspectors in the past haven't paid much attention to them. I think we still need to express those concerns, but nevertheless make them, if you like, supplementary to the main objection in this case, which is based on the national park, based on the fact that it's not within the national park but adjacent to it and will have a very marked impact on views from the national park towards Seaford, from Seaford Head and the nature reserve, the golf course and everything else to the east. So that's really the plan, and I'm just asking for your approval to put in a formal objection based on those concerns. The dates of the hearing is uncertain. Planning inspectors want it to be held on the 14th of November. Lewis DC have two other appeal hearings on the 14th of November, so they can't deal with it. So an alternative date is being negotiated at the moment. So I'll let members know the date as soon as and the venue as soon as it's confirmed. But what we have to do at the moment is to get our objection in within the next 2 weeks. So that needs to be agreed, just to give me authority to attend the hearing, submit the objection and present it at the hearing.
Okay, yeah, questions, Councillor Highland.
Yeah, I was interested, obviously, in 3.1, it's a slightly different style of appeal, isn't it? Because it's not like I saw in for the conclave.
No,
it's a slightly more informal.
It's like the Churchill one. It just lasts a day, and you're around the table and deal with the issues one by one. And he goes around the table asking the main parties, and then any other interested parties like the town council or residents. And it lasts a full day, and there'll be a site visit, but it's not as formal as a public inquiry. There's no cross-examination or anything like that. So I was cross-examined at the public inquiry.
Thank you for that. That's good.
Yes, Dan.
Hi, thank you, Chair. This is probably my ignorance is going to show here, but how does a care home work in terms of people that go there? They don't buy the accommodation, do it? Is it the same deal as McCarthy Stone kind of thing?
I think there'd be no. This is it's far more care provided. It's probably a monthly fee, I should think, for that facility.
A monthly fee. So if the care home only has 50% occupancy, so 30 people rather than 60. So for example, the Coffee Stone and their ilk, if you go to meet your maker whilst you own the property there, if you die while you're in place, the estate still has to pay the monthly service charge.
What? On a foreign's house?
No, I'm talking about McCarthy Stone.
McCarthy
I'm trying to
Stone,
understand if it's a similar
No.
commercial arrangement with the care home.
McCarthy and Stone apartment is it's like a flat. It's leasehold, and when the occupant passes away, the apartment or flat passes to the beneficiaries in the will. And
You continue to have to pay
well
for. I can tell you this from personal experience.
It would be the same as if your parents owned a flat in another block, there's still service charges and things you have to pay.
I also have some other things to add when we come to the Stone kind of thing.
We're sort of digressing a
But
little bit.
I'm just neighbours. It's just, so it's a different commercial arrangement with care home compared to.
I think one of the concerns is that the residents here will be needing care. They have acute health needs already, but there won't be doctors at the care home to care for them
There'll
necessarily.
be chronic health needs, I'm sorry. There won't be acute health needs, otherwise they'd be in hospital.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I'm not up with terms.
But
Yeah, so but they'll need local GPs to attend them, and the likelihood is that most of them will come in from outside the area. Some will not come in from outside the area. Some will already have their GPs registered locally, but others will come into the area because it's an attractive area to come to, and there might not be sufficient accommodation like this in the towns where they live, and so. The concern is that it will put particularly high pressure on local GP surgeries because all the clients, if you like, will need health needs dealt with straight away. I mean, McCarthy and Stone say they have more active elderly take up their apartments, but the average age of a McCarthy and Stone resident is 78. So most 78-year-olds will already have health needs, and if maybe not acute health needs, but some sort of health need. So that was our argument that McCarthy and Stone development would put an undue pressure on local health infrastructure, but it just what the inspector said was that the local health authority, the clinical health commission, or whatever.
CCG.
Yeah.
But they're not called that.
No. The body that would have responsibility for objecting to a development on the basis that the health services haven't been put in place haven't made any comment. Well, they wouldn't on smaller applications like this. They would only stick their neck out for a new surgery or something on a major development of hundreds of properties. They would tend to look at an application like this and they'll say, well, we wouldn't be able to require money for health needs from a smallish application. They reserve their fire, if you like, for larger developments which are bound to put the pressure on where they can extract some capital or maybe even a surgery out of the planning obligations.
Councillor Martin.
okay, thank you very much. Chair, I've got two kind of queries about it, though I see absolutely where it's heading. I think we can argue against the health issues, but as you have said so clearly earlier, the health issues are not being taken into consideration. There is an argument to say, just in general, about builds and multiple occupancy home sites, is that the more we say yes to them, then we are going into the hundreds, but we're still not doing anything about our health services. So if you keep having a planning application that only looks at one unit that says they might have 30 or 60, oh, that's not very many. But down the road, you've got another unit that's got 40, and then another one that's got whatever. Then even though they're not big enough to create SIL, this is really frustrating for us, they are big enough to have, collectively over, say, a 5-year period of build, quite an impact on a crumbling health service locally. And I don't know how that...
Well, I can put that into the objection, just as you stated it.
Yeah, I think that is...
We can say we've been ignored on these other two occasions, but, cumulatively, the pressure is growing.
Exactly, and continuously.
Yeah.
So, because at the end of these statements we're supporting Lewis in their housing development needs, basically, but Lewis aren't supporting us in our health development needs. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's kind of like there has to be some bargaining chip there or something. Anyway, that's slightly an aside to what I'd also like to say, which is that in this particular development, which is privately owned land that's being sold for whatever reasons, that if this doesn't go through, it's quite possible another application for some other form of development will still come, because inevitably, if the reason for selling off the land is to support, something, then we'll end up in a similar situation with.
We've already had an application.
It's allocated for 7 houses in the plan.
But 7 houses could be quite large houses, presumably still in that area.
Yes, but
because there's quite a lot of land.
ones but with a proviso that they are the impact
I do know
the
something.
impact on the
I do know
national
the
park.
person that owns Florence House.
I know we're not going to speak, so at the end you can.
The impact on the national park is minimal, but that's a proviso. But nevertheless, there's a provision for 7 houses in the plan. But they'll be fronting south down the road.
I mean, I know that a friend of mine moved to Seaford from Lewis. She can't get registered with a GP. So she stayed with her GP in Lewis. And that's the share.
Yeah, it's the same with new residents in Newland.
So,
Well, obviously, I'll make that point in the statement,
Yeah.
cumulative effect.
yeah,
It's,
good point.
I'm not going to give up, but just letting you know that on previous occasions it just doesn't carry any weight. Although, the local MP's been trying to, I think, talk to ministers about it, and I think a lot of local MPs are getting the same feedback from their local councils, town and parish councils about health infrastructure. You read it in the national papers as a reason for resisting large developments, but there's very little that's done about it, unfortunately.
Can you get some information from the 2 GP surgeries to go as evidence to the fact that they've got waiting lists and not taking on new patients and things? That is, there's a bit of evidence that the 2 local GP surgeries haven't got capacity.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I can see why they don't use the health infrastructure numbers and everything, because they're thinking probably as well you're going to ease off someone else's health issue if you're moving from one to another. You see what I mean? So you're sort of
Just
with a little bit of migration, and they know people pass as well. So then there are gaps in getting them on the registers in the various GPs. So there's a bit of that goes on. So maybe that's their thinking. So the weight is not that high, relatively speaking, compared to what we're saying nationally about the national park. So because it wasn't used in the Conclave one, they ignored it, didn't they? Completely. Yeah.
I think we've exhausted this one, so we take the 3 recommendations together and everybody agreeable. So can I have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gorman. Seconded by, thank you, Councillor Buchanan. And can I have a show of hands, please?
I'm going to abstain.
Right, that's 5-0, 1 abstention.
Thank you. Agenda item 8. To present details of the proposed road closure application for Seaford bonfire for this committee to note. Any comments on this? I think it's more or less straightforward. It works each year. Councillor Gorman.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the same every year, and it works very well. And I think whoever puts the plans in splits it down precisely what they're going to do with times and when and that. So
It's the same organisation that works with us on Christmas Magic, Adam from Sussex Events. So we use him for our events. We know that he's very reliable and the best person around to deal with this sort of event.
Unless there's any comments, can I have show of hands? I've noted in the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Agenda item 9, to inform members of the Constitutional Club decision.
circulated a briefing note. Has everyone received the note? Yeah. Tried to sort of pare down the 20 or so pages. I mean, all I can say is that at least the inspector did find in our favour, if you like, on what I consider to be the worst aspect of the scheme, which was the fact that the occupants of the block would have to use the junction of Crouch Lane and Stane Road to access the seafront, and that's one of the most dangerous junctions you can come across because it's enclosed, there's no visibility and no pavement. So he did actually acknowledge that as quite a serious traffic safety, highway safety hazard to those pedestrians. He didn't like the way that pedestrians were sort of shunted onto the south frontage of the building, having to negotiate the Crouch Lane junction and everything. But as if you've seen the decision, he sort of was so in favour of the principle of the development that he balanced out the negative aspects, like the junction with Crouch Lane, by saying it was just the need for the development, the design, the way it fitted in with the area outweighed the drawbacks of the scheme, like the junction with Crouch Lane and Stane Road. And also Mrs. Hughes was talking about the impact on her at the inquiry. He did actually find that the eastern flank of the new building, facing where Mr. and Mrs. Hughes live, they got a little bit of garden, was austere and would have an impact on them, but the impact wouldn't be sufficient to outweigh all the other benefits of the development. So he did actually find, in a way, in their favour. He did find that their objection was valid, but it was just, as I said, simply outweighed by all the other factors. So there's nothing much we can do. There's no challenge. There's no easy way of challenging a decision like this. You have to start a high court case if you want to overturn the decision, and it has to be based on an error, usually an error by the inspector in not taking into account a relevant policy, using the wrong national guidance in the planning balance that he applied, or not interpreting a policy, national or local policy, correctly. And challenges are only usually brought by developers promoting major developments of hundreds or even thousands of properties, where it's worth challenging at every stage because of the money involved, if you like. So challenges are relatively rare, and I can't see any grounds for a challenge in this case that Lewis could use. I know that they're very disappointed with the decision, but the basis of it really is the fact that they haven't got the sufficient housing supply required by the government.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, I just wanted to pick it up on the housing supply issue. These flats are for families, single people.
Is any residential development, so nursing homes, care homes, this sort of assisted living, ordinary houses, flats, and everything, it's just counted as if there's one unit, one dwelling, one flat.
But that was the argument, sorry to go backwards, but that was the argument to not have that was one of the arguments listed in not supporting the Florence House application, was because it specifically focused on older residents that had ailments and wasn't actually going to fit into the needs of the Lewis housing criteria, which were families.
It would still supply 60 units off the requirement, but Lewis objected to it because of the impact on the national park normally and the drainage.
But that was in the
yes,
report as well. So I was just confused by reading.
Lewis would never support a scheme if the basis of their view was to refuse it. They would never sort of say, oh, but the refusal reasons are balanced out by the fact that we need to sort of find more housing. I suppose.
No, it's just the way that the report's written. Sorry, I'm just getting confused by that. I'm new to this. So the issue is that in the Florence House argument, it was that we didn't need that type of resident, but in the inspector's report that proposes Crouch Lane, it is that we do need these types of residents.
Yes, well,
and I'm just wondering what the classification of the residents was.
The government is saying that
older people.
The government is saying that we need, projecting forward 10, 15 years, there's a lot more levels of specialist accommodation
but
that we
it's
need.
The argument then for everything is exactly the same across the two. I'm sorry, but I don't see the difference in the argument in those areas. Yeah.
Yes, the housing delivery requirement is not subtle. It's like a bit of a sledgehammer. It accepts any unit of accommodation, any additional unit of accommodation that's supplied, be it a detached house, semi-detached house, flat, assisted living apartment, which is what McCarthy and Stone call their places, Churchill as well, and a unit in a nursing or care home, or a bed, if you will. They're all quite unsubtly classed as one dwelling for the housing delivery requirement. And the government are pressing authorities to find more accommodation in the different levels of accommodation for the elderly, rather than just sort of have one type of accommodation. Acknowledges that a lot of elderly people want to remain active, but to benefit from the social advantages of living together. It's a huge number of different reports that are quoted by McCarthy and Stone and Churchill that when they come to these appeals.
But it doesn't make any difference to the fact they're all probably people in their late 70s, mid to late 70s, and they'll all still require more GP service and support than before. But that again is not being taken into consideration in this, and yet it's been agreed. So it is enormously frustrating that the reasons for things seem to be, you say they're not subtle, but I think they're quite obtuse, because I think they're used in one respect because we just want to add to one argument, and then they're used against it in another argument. So the arguments don't seem to be being used in a consistent way.
No, I think we're going to go up with the same argument on the Florence House. That there is a need, and the inspector will probably take that into account. That's why, although we mention it, we have to acknowledge that maximum weight has to be put on the national park. At least there's a national park involved in Florence House. In the Constitutional Club, we had an adjacent conservation area, which Lewis and us tried to put due weight on, but was rejected by the inspector. For the Churchill development, there was no special designation at all. It was just the A259 fitting in with the character of Sutton Road. So at least, if this is a third of three, we've got the national park, the weight of the national park behind us, and I hope that an officer from the national park will come along as a witness to support Lewis at the hearing.
I'm going to say something that's right, Chair, on this. So I didn't think the inspector wasn't that keen on the Saxon Lane car park. He didn't think that was. He reckoned that in a way that sort of lowers the area, or even though the conservation area is not too far away, having that Saxon Lane car park wasn't. It sort of brought the area down a bit for something. That's how I interpreted it as.
Well, it's behind a flint wall, isn't it?
It wasn't special in his eyes, was it?
Well,
it wasn't special in his eyes, was it? That's how I sort of.
A lot of things, but no, it's a shame.
As Jeff said, we can't sort of alter things.
No.
So really, I think we've exhausted this over various meetings. So can we just note the report, please? Noted. Thank you.
Oh, local plan.
Agenda item 9, to inform members of the consultation on the National Association of Local Councils reform of local plans.
Yeah, this is the National Association of Local Councils has circulated this, well, it's a circular to us. It's a link to the actual consultation document from the Ministry, what used to be the Department of Environment, which is now Levelling Up Housing and Communities. It's quite technical in a lot of ways, but we see the advantage of putting our views back through the National Association of Local Councils so that it carries weight. There's not really a lot to emphasise because really commentating on the local plan procedure, it's quite technical and a lot of the questions are for practitioners. But there are important considerations. The government is trying to pare down the period for drawing up a local plan from 5 down to 2.5 years. But nevertheless, there's still a lot of technical studies that have to be done to feed into a local plan before an inspector considers it to be sound and allows it through. 2.5 years, well, it's difficult to do it within 5 years, given what the requirements are. So I think one of the points that we could make is that certainly 5 years is still required, and to pare it down to 30 months would be very, very difficult. It would be very difficult to produce a sound plan within that time, given the lack of resources of local planning authorities, finding it difficult to staff, to have enough staff to deal with applications speedily. And local plans have the same problem, staff moving on into private practice a lot of the times. A lot of the other questions that they pose are quite technical. And to save time, I was going to suggest that unless you have any specific views, I will go through the questions, and there's quite a lot of them, that could be regarded as relevant to town council's role in it, and suggest some answers in response, and agree a response with the chair before 22nd of September, which is when they want the consultation to be the consultation back. So unless members have got any, if that's okay, unless members have got any specific points. So the main one is on the length of time, the length of the time for the programme for drawing up a local plan. There's a few other matters that are relevant to town councils, but most of the questions here are quite technical and of no real relevance or interest to a town or parish council. Obviously we have a role, but it's limited.
Yeah, would you like us to read through this and think if there's anything?
Yes, if
we'd like you
see,
to highlight.
There are quite a few matters that came in at the last minute, including this one that I put on the agenda for today, where there's a lot of reading to be done. There's the appeal decision, there's Florence House, there's quite a few more additional reports than usual. So if you want to read through it and feed back comments to me, that's fine. I'll tie all the comments up, look at the questions myself, make a few comments of my own, submit it to Linda for agreeing before the 22nd of September, which is what, two weeks' time.
Yeah.
So if that's okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think one thing is, I like local plans, they're great, but the neighbourhood plan I still keep wanting to push that actually needs to take more weight, more precedence, and if we can get that in there somewhere, that our neighbourhood plans need to take kind of maybe a level standing, especially like at the moment where Lewis haven't got a local plan, then our neighbourhood plan should then have the full weight of our plan
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll work that into a response.
Especially with that housing delivery, because
Yes.
we were agreed what we want to build, and we're being influx with things because of the lack of local
Yeah.
plan and their lack of being able to meet their numbers.
Councillor Hanneman?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, over the 30 months, which is basically 2.5 years, isn't it? I can see why they want to do it like that. It's almost as though if they wanted it like that, it's almost as though you'd have someone basically working on it permanently. Because you would never really stop it to be ongoing forever, then, wouldn't it? So I can see why if that's their argument for having it like that.
Yeah, you'd have to leave a lot of the plan in place and just sort of review it and update it. It wouldn't be a new plan.
No.
So it's more like if it's a 30-month programme, it's just a review. It's just nibbling around the edges to update based on what's been happening in the previous 2 or 3 years. An entire plan takes a bit more trouble,
That's what I mean.
more time and trouble and expense.
Councillor Buchanan?
Thank you. So just a quick one. Having scanned this very quickly, the single most important sentence that comes out of this is that one just down at the bottom there on the screen. Consultation seeks insights on how local plans can be positively shaped by the views of communities and how their areas should evolve. That should put more weight on the requirements and the interests of local communities, as opposed to government.
Yes, yeah, good point. I'll work that into the response.
Well, that would help to have to overcome some of the discussions we've just been having on Conclave and stuff like that.
Yeah, fine.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay. So, again, take 1 and 2 together. Yep.
Yeah, fine.
So can I have a proposer seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Hanneman, and seconded by Councillor Gorman. And then I'd show of hands, please. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, now agenda item 11. To notify the committee of decisions taken by Lewes District Council on applications previously considered by the committee.
They're all in our favour this time.
Okay.
Just 6 or 7 applications, all going according to our response.
Okay. So unless there's any questions, can I ask members to note the report? Noted? Thank you. And that concludes the meeting at, what slide?
2044.
Thank you.